Dynamic Dad here. Wanted to make the second video kind of going into more detail with the specifics of the two narcissists that I've experienced in my life and kind of their behaviors and traits. First to level set, I know that the pop culture kind of perspective on narcissism is that you have this very egotistical, arrogant person who just kind of goes through their life like a bulldozer, my way or the highway. And while I'm sure there's narcissists out there that meet kind of those, traits and behaviors, that is not applicable to the narcissists that I've experienced in my life. I'll start with my ex-wife. As I said in the previous video, she was not a narcissist when we met, when we dated, when we got married, and throughout the majority of the marriage. After 19 years of marriage, she had a midlife crisis. Out of the midlife crisis, she invented this new persona, new personality, and that new person was a malignant narcissist. The flavor of narcissism that's called malignant narcissism is particularly evil. While all narcissists are driven by a sense of power, control, attention, what has even been described as like their specific type of addiction. For my ex-wife, it was conflict and basically controlling her environment and controlling the people around her through conflict. So she would very often, if you made plans with her, she would break the plans at the last minute. If she said she was going to do something, she wouldn't. She would, if you approached her with kind of, say something to do with like our two children, and you wanted to meet in the middle or have some compromise, that would be impossible. She would not want to budge or give an inch. It might be a situation where even what you were proposing would be beneficial to her. That's not the point in her mind. In her mind, her number one reason for getting up in the morning is conflict. One thing that's true for both types of narcissists that I've had to deal with in my life is that they are different than most people in how they handle arguments. I think most people are probably like me in that arguments, while sometimes necessary, are draining. They are something that you want, you want to get through, hopefully get to the end, either a compromise or an understanding or something like that, and then put it behind you and just go and, recuperate, recharge. Narcissists aren't wired that way. Narcissists gain energy from arguments. If something happens and there is an argument that starts, immediately you can tell there's no clock for them. They will argue until, in their mind, they win. And they have infinite energy and infinite time to argue. And again, it's one of those things that's very strange to people that aren't narcissists, just because we're not wired that way. And they, a little bit of a tangent here, but this is pertinent to narcissism and kind of their quirks, traits and behaviors. Narcissists, because they thrive and actually gain energy from arguments, will argue in a manner in which other people don't. For instance, they will take the argument in a million different directions, not simply as a way of, attacking the other person by moving away from any point that they may be making that's valid, but also as a way of prolonging the argument. And so, one thing that my ex-wife would do, and it is very typical for a narcissist, is what's called flip the script, where if you were to approach her about something that was of a concern to you, of an issue, she would flip it, and then before you could even realize it, you would be discussing her perspective and how things affect her when it might not even have anything to do with her. Both the narcissists in my life were experts at that. You could basically approach them with any, topic or issue to discuss, and within 5 minutes, the conversation would be upside down. And so instead of you approaching them to talk about like this issue that you've been concerned about and want to resolve, you're now talking about their issue or the issue from their perspective, and they might have even stolen your perspective, and somehow you're on the receiving end, and you're trying, you're in this conversation where all of a sudden, instead of like trying to reach a point where you're feeling better, now you're in this conversation where you're listening to the other person push their agenda and perspective and kind of say, no, you have to agree to this. And when you first deal with narcissists, this happens so subtly, you don't realize it. And then after the argument's over, you're kind of scratching your head because nothing's been resolved. In fact, not only has nothing been resolved, but you just spent the past hour listening to your issue from the other person's perspective and kind of their goal with that, and it might not have even been an issue for them. Very strange. So, needless to say, part of what really defines a narcissist, in my opinion, is that they thrive on arguments and gain energy from that. To be specific with the different types, so my ex-wife, I would categorize as a malignant narcissist. My ex-girlfriend, I very much think she meets the traits and criteria for a covert narcissist, which, interesting enough, is almost like the opposite of the malignant narcissist. That said, both of them would put down anything that they were doing and argue with you until the sun set, without breaking a sweat or anything. The one difference between the malignant narcissist and the covert narcissist, in my personal experience, was that whereas the malignant narcissist would actually create conflict in order to have these arguments, the covert narcissist would not. It was just a tool in the toolbox. And the main goal of the covert narcissist was attention, whereas the malignant narcissist, her main goal, addiction, if you will, was control and power, through control. the narcissist or covert narcissist, it was attention and gaining power by being almost the center of the in the spotlight. The center of the conversation, the center of whose needs and wants to get met, the center of who's prioritized in the relationship, etc. And so it was not something that she would initiate just in the routine day-to-day interactions. But if there was something that I were to bring up that didn't align with her goals, as far as like, okay, this is what I want and that's all that matters, it would immediately become an argument. And again, there's lots of tricks that the narcissist would use. As I said, previously, there was flipping the script. Another one was, I don't know what you call it, just the infinite tangent, where you would start, discussing point A because that's important, and you're like, okay, I want to have this discussion about this, and then it would slip to talking about B, and then it would be talking about C and D. And so, some examples of those would be, dead serious, the definition and proper use of specific words. So often in arguments, we might have, where we'd be discussing, and I might say reciprocity. And then for 15 minutes, we would have this surreal discussion on the definition of reciprocity and the correct use of the word within a sentence, totally independent of how it may pertain to the original point. And then after, say we got done with reciprocity, we might argue a little bit, back to the topic, and then pick another word, like say compromise, or just pick a word. That was another trick for just kind of like, one, getting off the subject, and two, prolonging it. Another one, very famous narcissist trick is, oh yeah, but you did this in the past. And so you might be talking about like a present issue in the relationship, and the other person would say, well, what about the fact that you did this 2 years ago? Okay, and it would be something completely unrelated to the topic at hand. Again, it was a way to not only go off on a tangent to move away from the subject, but also to go into attack mode, so that you're if you fall into the trap, then find yourself defending or discussing something that happened 2 years ago. And just to be clear, one of the reasons that the narcissists do these tricks is because, ironically, they're very insecure. Probably the most insecure people in the world. And they feel completely inadequate. And they will die before they let you know that. And so anytime you approach them with an issue to discuss, there's a good chance that they're going to perceive that as a criticism and not a topic to discuss. And as soon as they feel like they're being criticized or judged, they will raise the defenses, put up the walls, and the best defense is a strong offense. And they will go into attack mode. And these things that I've mentioned so far, with like the various, tricks of, flipping the script, flipping, going things around, turning things around and attacking you, going off on tangents. There's probably a dozen other ones that aren't coming to mind. But again, those are just tools in the toolbox, to use for the purpose of ultimately not having to take the perceived criticism, because that would be, it's just not something that they could handle in their mind. I mean, it's not an actual criticism. It's, bringing an issue to discuss, but that's how they perceive it, and to their way of thinking, that this completely warped. They'd rather die than face a actual criticism that was valid. So the the covert narcissist, their addiction, as I said before I went off on a tangent, is attention, or specifically the covert narcissist that I had experience with was attention. Attention through various means. Number one was victimhood, and this is very, very common for covert narcissists. Basically, it works perfect for them, because in being a victim, they, one, get sympathy and attention, which is basically the tastiest, if I can say that, type of attention that they want. It is the most satisfying to them, is to be the victim and get that sympathy for this perceived victimhood. Also, in any given situation, if they paint themselves as the victim, they are absolved of all responsibility. Not only responsibility for their own actions leading up to the incident that made them the victim, but also absolves them of any responsibility for the consequences of their actions leading up to the victimhood. And so not only do they get attention, which is what they want, but they protect themselves. Like, as I said, they're the most insecure, inadequate people walking the planet. And being the victim in any given situation allows them to protect themselves, because they are free of any criticism, responsibility, or consequences from any situation that happens to them in their life across the board. So, and I mean, there are some other traits to malignant narcissists and covert narcissists, but I think those are the two main ones that I experienced personally, one-on-one in my life. So hopefully that's been helpful, and I'll continue talking about specific issues, traits, and behaviors related to narcissism in further videos. Thanks.